recording. Okay, so before we continue, because we've already started, let's briefly summarize once more the Mishnah that we said. So we've got Rabban Gamliel, who is telling us that it is good to combine Torah study with a worldly occupation, because if you do that, then you will forget sin. And then we said that if you are working for the community, you should work l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven, because then we have the merit of our ancestors to assist us, and it is a much more enduring thing. So Peter chimed in and said, is that because everybody had Torah as their worldly occupation? It's very possible that a lot of people were studying, but obviously Jewish people throughout history have had jobs, have had very prominent positions, have had if we consider the fact that we didn't have a worldwide infrastructure in place and people made their own things and sold them for money, it's not entirely accurate to say that everybody was exclusively studying Torah. But there is a point nonetheless to be made for the importance of the balance of the work life and the balance of our own spiritual growth. Does anybody have anything else to say before we dive into it a little bit deeper?
In practical terms, in Israel, that's often not the case.
Exactly, I agree with
Correct.
that.
They're at Shiva all the time, every day. Their parents support them so they can study all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
That is true. So
certain groups, Haredim in particular, I mean, they send their kids to yeshiva, and that's for years sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm also surprised that a rabbi will turn around and say that Torah study could lead to sin.
He says will.
That's interesting.
I was
Will
trying
is
to be
the,
nice.
Yeah,
I was trying to be nice.
You're saying full-time study could lead to sin.
where does it say full time?
I think,
Well,
Paul, are you picking
any-
up on the fact that it says Torah study without an occupation will in the end fail and lead to sin? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's very troublesome.
I can't believe that anybody can put the two things in the same sentence.
So
Surely
that's amazing.
Torah study, by definition, any Torah study, and he is adding a comment to what is already there, i.e. the Torah is there. If you study the Torah, it could lead to sin. Firstly, I don't think it's actually for anybody to turn around and say that. And I'm absolutely shocked that he would want to do that.
So let's see if we can understand what that might mean. This often gets interpreted in the following way. If you are studying exclusively, first of all, we have to understand what kind of sin we think it's going to lead to. So Paul reads this, and Paul says this could lead to sin. What do you envisage this guy might be getting up to? All he is doing is learning Torah.
Well, that's even worse, because after what we said yesterday, he hasn't even suggested what type of sin. He's left it that it could be any sin. I mean, it gets worse by the minute if you look at what he's actually said.
So Paul says that the fact that it doesn't even tell us what the sins could be makes it even worse. How could studying Torah lead a person to sin? So the traditional way in which this gets understood is that if a person exclusively learns Torah and doesn't take on a worldly occupation and doesn't do anything to earn money, then they're going to end up going around and having to collect. And by doing so, it actually distracts them from being able to sit and study. And then the fact that they are going around and relying exclusively on the money that they can collect from other people, we never know where that could lead to. That could lead to people taking drastic measures like theft and taking away things that don't necessarily belong to them, but they need it because they have no money. And so we're not necessarily
and yet, to
saying
the contrary, a lot of them will turn around and say, Hashem will provide.
They might do, but we have a balance in life of having to do our own efforts. Paul was saying, because I don't know if you can hear the Zoom chat, I don't think you can. Paul was saying that people might learn exclusively and then have the opinion that God will provide, in which case, how could it ever lead to sin? And the answer is that we have to do both. We have to do our exertion. We have to do what's called in Hebrew our hishtadlut. We have to put our own effort in. And then Hashem from the other side will also help balance and tip things in our favor. But if there's no way of attaining an income, you can't necessarily, I mean, some people can maybe, but it doesn't work on a global scale. It doesn't work on a widespread scale for everyone to just kind of sit back and say, don't worry, God will provide for all of us. He's definitely capable of providing for all of us. That's not necessarily what God has in mind, and certainly not what Rabban Gamliel would say we have
So
to.
what he's saying is study is blindingly obvious, you're saying.
Pardon
He's
me?
just saying, he's making quite an obvious statement. If you have no income, you will have to find an income from something which could potentially be causing sin. Therefore, you absolutely need to have a job. Therefore, it's blindingly obvious. Why is he saying it?
Isn't there
Well,
also
there's nothing wrong with it being blindingly obvious.
isn't there also the
What's the problem with it
possibility that by studying exclusively, you're not really contributing to the welfare of the community or to the world at large? It's a very selfish, in some respects, it's a very selfish occupation.
So that's a really important point to make as well. Philip Waxman is making the point that it is a very selfish way of looking at the world to exclusively study Torah and rely on others for support. This is very interesting because the wording of the Mishnah said the following: Rabban Gamliel beno shel Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi Omer. He says, by the way, is the picture jumping in and out, or is it staying on the screen?
Very good. No, it's clear.
Okay, good. My computer's being a bit funny.
We can see you. Yeah.
So he said, I'm just
We can't see the signal
Well,
now.
that's probably us.
so
Probably me. Okay, you're still trying.
So,
we can't see the text.
Yeah,
you can't see the text now.
No.
That's what I thought. So just one second. Let's get it back up. My thing is jumping in and out. All right. So it says Rabban Gamliel. He says Yafet Talmud Torah im derech eretz. That it is good to combine Torah study with derech eretz. Now we've been translating that as a worldly occupation, right? But that's not the only way that one can translate derech eretz. And in fact, the commentaries. Has it gone off again, guys?
I can't see the book, but I can listen to
the
you.
text is not there.
The text is not.
Text keeps disappearing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Um,
What is eretz means here? What is eretz mean? Honesty?
Yeah. So derech eretz encompasses many things, which if I can get my screen sharing working.
If you're saying derech eretz, I don't have a problem with it. Sorry. Then I take back everything I've said. That wasn't the translation that was put in. That was all.
Yes, correct.
Can I just say, I have this Avot, right? And it says, derech eretz, literally this means the way of the world. A trade, vocation or business is usually rendered a worldly occupation. It is possible that we here contrast the Torah, which is heavenly, with work which is mundane.
Very good. So that's what I was coming to. So derech eretz has a broad range of understandings and translations. We can often refer to it as courtesy, as manners, as having consideration for others, a civil and respectful attitude towards government and society. And then on top of that, it also is talking about gainful employment, being industrious, earning a living for oneself, contributing to one's society. That would all be encompassed in this concept of derech eretz. And so, Philip, you're 100% right to make the observation that it's a very selfish attitude to only focus on one. And that is why there is the imperative of pursuing both, because we are encouraged to contribute and not to just live isolated by ourselves. Although I realize, as I say that, we're all living isolated by ourselves. But we are also contributing to society in so many ways, as we've seen. And that leads us on to the second part of the mission as well, talking about giving to the community l'shem shamayim. It really is all part and parcel of this same idea of not just being serving ourselves, as it were, but realizing that we need to be toiling in both and actively contributing in both, because it is so important. And there's a very interesting thing as well, because what we've been saying is Talmud Torah im derech eretz. Now, I don't know if anybody knows about this this phrase, but there's another teaching which is derech eretz kadma l'Torah. Has anybody heard of that before?
No.
So derech eretz kadma l'Torah essentially means that in order to really have an effective connection with Torah, one needs to first have derech eretz. Derech eretz is the platform from which Torah can be built off, which I think is why derech eretz has such a broad application, such a broad definition, because it doesn't just mean getting a job. One has to also take into account that it means these other things as well, of being courteous, of having good midot, of being a nice person. All of these things, they have to be the platform from which Torah can be built.
Why the Haredim, is that what you just said? Is that why the Haredim don't follow? I mean, they follow this purchase and all that, but they don't follow this worldly, occupation. But when the Haredi people are studying Pirkei Avot, obviously their thing on worldly occupation is more being a mensch.
So Rita, you're asking, don't the Haredi community learn Pirkei Avot? Is that essentially what you're asking?
Yes, that's it, yeah. So how did they interpret their way of worldly occupation? Is it being a mensch?
So first of all, as we said, Torah, derech eretz does get interpreted primarily. The primary definition is the courtesy, is the manners, and all of that. So that is the primary definition of derech eretz. That is certainly a concept that is universally acknowledged. The idea of derech eretz meaning a worldly occupation is not universally agreed upon by everybody that has taken a look at this Mishnah. Everybody, certainly in the Haredi world, would understand that there is immense value to studying Torah, immense purity and immense holiness that comes about from studying Torah, and that is why there is such a massive focus on studying Torah in those communities. However, it can come at a cost if there's no financial support in place to at least provide a basis from which the Torah study can grow from. So I can't speak on behalf or against the Torah communities that prioritize the focus of Torah study on everything else, but it is important to know that both worlds exist, basically. And both opinions exist, and it's up to each individual to assess the balance and to assess the level at which one would independently understand how the balance should work. What's interesting, though, is the fact that it says Yafet Talmud Torah im derech eretz shigiat shnehem mishkachat avon, because if you're involved with both of them, then you forget sin. You forget sin. So I'm wondering, what do people think about that? You're involved with both and you forget sin.
Because you're busy all day, you do things which you should be doing, So you don't go into stealing or whatever. You're busy with learning Torah, your occupation, which whatever in this, whatever you do, you haven't got time to go and do things which are not right.
Lovely. That's a beautiful answer. Do we have any other?
Yes, can I ask you? In my Levavot here, it says compare KID 29a. I don't know what that is. KID 29a. He who does not teach his son a trade teaches him to be a thief.
Ah, so that is a reference to the Talmud, Kiddushin 29a,
Oh,
in which you find that quote.
Yes,
He who does not teach his child a trade teaches him to become a thief. So the connection there is one in which we can understand and identify with.
My view is keep busy with things which you should be doing.
Keep busy with the things that we should be doing.
Yeah.
I think that's an amazing way of looking at it. Yeah, pardon?
Also, I think if you're learning Torah, you can apply it to what you do at work and everyday life. Yeah.
Say again, Peter.
Yeah.
If you're learning Torah and you've got a job, you can apply what you learn at the Torah to everyday life.
So says Peter that by having a job,
it's cruel though.
Ooh. Say again, Neil.
Surely it's cruel that in certain communities, they're not teaching their kids the sciences, the languages, the mathematics, and everything that we take for granted in our communities. And therefore, it's not preparing them for the real world. It's only preparing them for a world of Torah. These days,
the real world.
you need more. And to me, it almost comes under abuse of some sort. It's not an intentional abuse, I don't think. It's taking away the right of the child that they're to learn.
I think you'll find there are many that agree with you then, Neil.
No, I agree with you, Neil.
Yes.
I don't think you'll be on your own there.
I love you all.
So Rita said a lovely thing before. Rita was saying that if we are keeping busy with our occupations, with the things that we're getting up to, and we are busy with Talmud Torah, with studying Torah, then we just won't have any time to make any mistakes because we'll be so busy. That actually makes me think of something that we said a long time ago when we started this, which is that the world is founded on three things. We said it's founded on Torah, on Avodah, and Gemilut Chasadim. That it's founded on study of Torah, Avodah, which is prayer, the performance of mitzvot, and Gemilut Chasadim, acts of loving kindness. And one of the things that I realized is if we, at any point in our day, are doing any of one of those three things, then it doesn't leave any time in the day for any other mistakes or any other things to get wrong. So the world exists on this tripod of connection and goodness, and if one is always involved in one of those things, then one can never come to making mistakes and to doing things that could be wrong in the eyes of God and in the eyes of others as well. There's another interesting perspective to this. I mean, it's all interesting, but there's another interesting perspective to this, which is that if we work at both Talmud Torah and also Derech Eretz, it weakens a desire and it weakens the opportunity for making mistakes. So it's not just that we're so busy that we won't do anything wrong, but it's also that it weakens the desire. Because if we live a fulfilling life and we are conducting ourselves in a way that brings us what we call in Hebrew sipuk hanefesh, it is giving us the boost in life that we need. So then, as we know, when we get occupied with things and we're so focused and we're so driven, so it removes the temptation for anything else. Someone was mentioning to me that by sitting at home and working all day, they actually find themselves more focused. and less distracted. So when we are involved with things that are providing our lives with purpose and with meaning, then we actually lose the inclination, we lose the temptation to do other things, which I think is a component to all of this as well.
Actually, we can see it now with people being at home. Even we got an email just before I came on, just had an email about scam going on, about children who can't be fed and people are ringing in to help, and it's all a scam. So you can see that these people have got too much time on their hands. They're just trying to promote people. So it's so true what we just learned today. You've got too much time. You're thinking about things which are not right, which you shouldn't be doing, and you're still doing it.
They're professional crooks.
Yeah, Peter's just said they're professional crooks.
Yes.
All be aware of all these scams coming on now. So we had quite a few called the other day as well. So be aware, because people have got too much time and people right.
They're looking for mischief.
Yeah.
But it's not just, sorry, it's not just our religion. We have a wonderful privilege being Jewish, and every religion offers. But I know if you take aspects of Church of England, for example, I have very limited knowledge on this, but I believe mainly in the Protestant church more than the Catholic church. There's just none there. So there are no morals, there are no standards being taught by the church for the kids. There's no church, no what we would have the old JLGB, whatever the church equivalent of that would be. There's nothing to get people, young people, for the last 25, 30 years. The Church of England, that side of it, it's all but disappeared. So everything that we do communally for our kids and learning and teaching right from wrong and morals and so on, they just don't have that opportunity anymore.
Well, they have Sunday school, and they teach love for their love for humanity.
Look at I live over the road from the church here, opposite the shul. There's no school. There's no one goes into that church. They don't even have a minion there.
There must be someone going to Sundays. There must be. We're not around on Sundays when they have their services.
Believe me, I've seen it. The bells ring, and there's lucky they get a couple of dozen people go to church on Sunday.
Yeah.
But the point is, there's no kids club. There's nothing to attract the kids to learn. There's nothing to learn.
Yeah.
So how are they prepared morally for society and have their derech eretz for society?
I'm not in charge of education and policy at the local church, unfortunately. But it makes a good point, which is that it's important to have these components in there. I think we just strengthen the point.
Don't we always think of ourselves as a family? If you go abroad to anywhere in the world, you usually find your way to a shul, and you're welcomed. I mean, it's like a family, it's a Jewish family. We think we belong to a huge family.
I think we should be proud of that fact.
Yes, yeah.
And even when we can't be in physical proximity of each other, I think we've got so much to be proud of that we've banded together as a community.
There is something in this text that we've been looking at that actually implies the responsibility to family. We talked about community, but this goes into what David was that was being said about the Christian communities. It's what we have in a Jewish family is very special because it involves everything, including education.
Mm-hmm.
So from what we do in our homes, children are being educated all the time. There's a very there's a very central message in this text that talks really to family.
And I think we're definitely more sensitive to that now, now that we don't have the institutions that we've been relying on to help with the education. But primarily, that is one of the things that we're finding, or at least it's one of the messages that we're receiving loud and clear now in the situation that we're in, which is it all begins at home. It really does, and that's not just the education of children. But that applies to everything. You know, I'm not sure how many people are new here because I can't see who. I think we've got Alison Cohen hiding there, and I don't know who Martin is. But anyway, Philip, you're not necessarily used to all the things that I say at Lunch and Learn, but I do often talk about how, you know, shul is not solely where it's all at. Even though shul is a huge focus of what we do as a community and what we try and put on for the community, 95% of our lives is about that which we practice at home or don't practice at home. And certainly now we're all in a situation where we are having to provide introspection and to meditate and to think about what it is that we do at home and what we tap into at home. And I think it's amazing that you can read that into what you see here. The next part of the Mishnah, Kol ha'oskim im hatzibur, yihiyu oskim imahem l'shem shamayim. All who exert themselves for the community should do so for the sake of heaven. I think this is an amazing concept as well. It's all amazing. But I find this to be really, it's scary how this Mishnah we've reached at this point in time, at this point in history. You know, it's you know, nothing is coincidental, but this is a huge coincidence. As we see so many exerting themselves for the community, and I think that it's an amazing concept as well. I mean, first of all, what do we think it means? Should do so for the sake of heaven. Don't all rush at once.
I think it means not for the sake of heaven, I would say, but for the sake of the Jewish world, the Jewish nation.
So exert yourself for the community for the sake of the Jewish nation.
And for all our well-being.
Okay.
Is heaven here not God, or is it the Jewish people?
So L'Shem Shamayim would often be, pardon?
Otherwise they would have said for the sake of God, but it doesn't. He said for the sake of heaven.
Heaven, Shamayim.
So L'Shem Shamayim is a phrase that is synonymous with doing it for the sake of God. Why it's phrased as L'Shem Shamayim, I would have to look into that to be able to articulate clearly why L'Shem Shamayim is the preferred phrase instead of La Hashem or wording like that. But L'Shem Shamayim is always synonymous with doing things for the sake of God. But what it means is for doing it for the right reasons. So one of the ways this Mishnah gets interpreted is that anybody who exerts himself for the community should be doing so for the right reasons. Shouldn't be doing it for the glory, shouldn't be doing it for the plaque on the wall, shouldn't be doing it so that everybody loves you, shouldn't be doing it so that people think you're amazing. It's supposed to be more altruistic than that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another angle to this which I find particularly relevant to my life, which is when we say to do it L'Shem Shamayim, when we understand that we are serving God, when we understand that we are doing these things because they're the right things to do and not because we are trying to get something out of it, then that is basically a call to action, and to understand that you might have to get ready for disappointment, you might have to get ready for misunderstandings, you might have to get ready that people won't appreciate that which you do. But if we are able to do these deeds, we're able to contribute to the community and not do it with the expectation of some reward, or the expectation of everyone patting you on the back, or the expectation that that everyone's going to know about it. Then I think that is the focus of where this mission is going, because it can be really, what do they say? It's lonely at the top. If a person does what they do because they want people to be thanking them constantly, you might never get what you're looking for. If you're doing these things because you want honor and you want respect, and you're just not getting it, then it might be the wrong thing for you. If you're doing things and you get so frustrated when it doesn't go your way, that's an inevitability of doing things for the community. We always talk about the guy that goes to the hospital to go and do Pirkei Cholim. He goes to go and visit a sick person, and he gets to the ward, and he asks the nurse on attendance, could you tell me where Stacy, which bed Stacy is in? And they say, oh, we discharged her today, she's gone home, she's better. And you're just like, oh, I can't believe it, I've come all this way and I can't even do it anymore, she's already better. Oh, how discourteous and inconsiderate of her. So if we're going to do these things, and we're going to do mitzvah, and we're going to help people, whatever, and get annoyed when it doesn't go exactly our way, then that's also one of the messages to come out of this Mishnah, that we don't do these things because of what it gets for us, but we do these things either because they're the right thing to do, or because it helps other people. So it's an important call to arms as well. Anyone got anything to say on that?
No.
No, I've got to say, Rabbi, that's not a natural thing in this world, though, is it?
What's that?
Well, it's the sort of thing a rabbi says we should do it because for the right thing, and we should do it only because we shouldn't want nachas, we shouldn't want building up, we shouldn't want the plaque on the wall. There are almost no people that don't want the plaque on the wall. And there's actually, with respect, I'm not sure there's actually anything wrong with the plaque on the wall. I remember the good old days when you got called up, and if you gave money, they said actually how much you'd given. And and I was told by my rabbi that in previous days, in his time, that if someone gave money, some other people would give more money. And it was a way that they raised money. It wasn't done, oh, no, hang on a minute, you mustn't say how much. Actually, quite the opposite. If somebody gave something, it was an example. So what I'm saying is, to say that everybody should do everything because they don't want anything in return is not a natural thing for people not to want something in return. What Correct. They get in return, you might say, is, yes, but they're learning, they're getting closer to Hashem. Those are the things, and that's what you're going to get. Maybe in this life, maybe in the next life.
Well, can I interrupt?
I think you're making an excellent point, Paul. And I think we have to pick it apart a little bit. First of all, I think the reason why perhaps it needs to be stated as it is in the Mishnah is because that is the natural drive. That is the way that people operate. And the Torah acknowledges that fact, to the point that we see in the Talmud that we are encouraged to do things even when we might not be doing them for the right reasons, right? And there's a phrase in the Gemara that goes, mitoch shelo lishma ba lishma. We'll start doing a mitzvah even though we're not doing it for the right reasons, because ultimately we hope that by doing whatever good deed, whatever mitzvah it is, eventually we will be doing those things because it's the right thing to do, and we're doing it for the right reasons. So, for example, the whole of life operates like this. when we are training our children to tidy up the house, right? So to do it lishma, to do it for the right reasons, means that the house is untidy and you should feel like you have a level of responsibility to keep your house tidy. But they're children, they haven't learned that sense of responsibility yet. So first of all, we say to them, if you go and tidy your room, I will give you a sweet, right? And then they go off and they tidy their room, and then we give them a sweet. So we give them an incentive to clean their rooms, and then they do it. And then the next time you need them to clean their room, you don't want to give them a sweet every time. So then you go, okay, we've now got a sticker chart. Every time you tidy your room, we'll put a sticker on your chart, and every 5 times, every 10 times, we'll give you a sweet. So they go, they tidy their room 5 days, they get the stickers on their chart, they get the sweet. And then you're like, okay, well, we need to wean them a little bit more off this, otherwise I'm still going to give out sweets the whole time, right? So then we give it every 10 times. And before we know it, we've trained our children to instinctively clean up their rooms and clean up their house, because they understand that it's important. And it's not just about the reward that we get, and it's not just about the pat on the back that we get, but actually it's part of something bigger. So that's a small example, but we find ourselves doing that in all kinds of spheres and all kinds of walks of life and different examples. We give ourselves a big reward. We realize we don't need such a reward until eventually we wean ourselves off needing the reward at all, but we're doing it because it's the right thing to do and it's what we should be doing. So I think that's the drive that the Mishnah is taking. I think that's the steer.
And I think I'm just trying to make the point that you are very special. You understand that, and you have become a rabbi, and therefore you live by that thought. My point is probably that if you want the community to do the things that you want us to do, it's not through preaching altruism that's going to get us there. The young people who are not coming to shul.
Paul, let me say something to you.
Let Paul finish. Let Paul finish.
Oh, okay.
Well, I just don't think I think for the people who have Hashem every day in their lives that are reading this are altruistic already. They are doing a great job. Love them, absolutely marvelous. And you as a rabbi are incredible and a great person to look to become like. The other 900 people in our community are not altruistic.
How do you know that?
I guarantee you the thing they're worried about is their family. The thing they're worried about
Paul,
is there's lots of things
I'm going to politely disagree for the following reason. First of all, we have to remember that the things that we've been learning about, we're not saying that a person has to just click their fingers and then everything falls into place. As we've said, everything is about a balance. Everything is about understanding, the trajectory that we can take things on, and applying that in our own way, in our own lives, at our own pace. I don't think you would say, as a universal principle in life, that one should always do things for the sake of a reward. Because if that was the case, then every single time your grandchild tidies up, you should plow them with rewards. So at one extreme, so I'll come to you in a sec. At one extreme, we can at least understand that there's a scale over here. We can understand that the extreme of not doing anything is not an appropriate course of action. We can understand that only doing things if you're going to get some kind of benefit is the other end of the extreme. And then there's all of the space in the middle.
And the space in the middle is filled by incentive.
Say something.
Pardon me? I will come to you. We just have to give Paul the chance to air.
I'm just saying that space in the middle is well served by something called incentive. Yes. So when you want people to do something, to give them the incentive to do it is actually a great way forward. Not that they want something from the end, but because they then have the incentive to go out and do it. The incentive here is to become like you, Rabbi, because you have taken it. The
Can I
Make him blush.
can I say something? Rita speaking.
No, but Paul, I agree with you on that. It is all about the incentive, but you know,
Not the reward.
Not
it's
all.
Right, can I say
it's about plugging this concept in to several different examples. We're going to come to Rita now because she's very patiently been.
Yeah.
No, can I just say
Thank
something?
you, Rabbi.
We are. Can you hear me, Rabbi? Or can you
Yeah.
hear me? Paul? Right.
Yes, we can hear you.
Right. I can give it for now. We are giving. I'm talking about Bushy Shul or whatever shul it is. We are giving rewards every single year. We've got Chazan Bereshis, we've got the Torah. We're always giving rewards. You have done well for the community. Here we are. We put your name on there. We give you a certificate, and we give you a big kiddush at the end of it. So we are rewarding the people.
You've got to pay for that, kiddish.
I'm talking generally. Everything we do for people.
Only you could say that.
Well, the thing is, we are rewarding them, aren't we?
It is not the reward, the mitzvah of doing it. That is,
Well,
If we're not waiting for it, these people are doing these good things and are waiting for this being rewarded as a gracious, but they're doing it because they want to do it.
Sounds gone.
Yeah.
They are rewarded. We are all rewarded, not all.
Yes.
But a lot of people are rewarded on what they're doing.
Yes.
They're not being rewarded, they're being thanked.
And on top of it, they're getting a plaque as well. On top of the
That's interesting, Gary.
I didn't hear what Gary said.
They're not being rewarded, they're being thanked.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
Maybe they feel rewarded.
Thank you. It's the only thank you when you become Muslim Torah, you've got to pay for your own kiddush.
What I would like to say on Rita's point is the following thing that we find also from this mission as well, which is that Rita, you were essentially saying that people do these things not because they know that they're going to be awarded the position of Chatan Bereshit or Eshet Chayil at the end of it. They're doing these things because they want to help, because they get value or they see value in what they're doing. 100%. The one thing that this Mishnah also encourages us to reflect on is the following. It says, "Va'atem ma'ale ani aleichem sechar habe ki'ilu asitem." And you, I will bestow upon you as great a reward as though you had achieved what you wished. There's a really important thing to understand. Two really important things. Number one, whatever reward we might get, whatever boost we might have in this world from the things that we do, right? We're also going to get a boost and a reward in the spiritual sense, and the rewards that we get after we move on from this world. And I think one of the things to appreciate in all of this is if a person gets involved with community work, right? And which we're saying we should do l'shem shamayim. Why should we do it l'shem shamayim? Because if we're doing it for reasons, we might find that we're not getting those reasons, right? So if things don't go our way and we feel disappointed by that, a person who understands that they did it for the sake of the community, perhaps the community just didn't need it or didn't want it, then a person won't be impacted if it doesn't go their way. If a person doesn't get the appreciation that they deserve, right, because the community or whoever it was you were trying to help didn't give you that appreciation, then the background knowledge that what you have done is good and was the right thing to do, that should give us the resilience and the stamina and the fortification to be able to continue with the valued work, even if it's not ticking those particular boxes. Now, Paul was saying people need incentives, and I 100% agree with you. When we went to our recent conference with the other rabbinic families from United Synagogue, and all of the talks that we were listening to were about resilience and about mental health and all this kind of thing. It's a work in progress. However much Paul thinks that I am the target and I am the top of the scale, I can assure you, as rabbis, as rabbinic teams, we constantly we do need that ego boost, and we do need you know, the positive feedback just as much as the negative feedback, because from a mental health point of view and from a resilience point of view, everybody does need that feedback. But as we said, there's a top of a chair, there's a top of a scale, which is where if we were doing everything l'shem shamayim, and we understood that whatever gets thrown our way, it doesn't matter, because we understand that we're doing the right thing. I'm not at that point yet either, Paul. I just want to state that emphatically. I'm not there yet either. Right? But it's with all of these things, it's a process. And the other thing that I just wanted to say is that in Judaism, we have an amazing concept which doesn't really exist in the way most of the world works. Right? The end of this Mishnah says, I will bestow upon you as great a reward as though you had achieved what you wished.
No, we're getting good. You're frozen.
Who's frozen? Who's frozen? Hello? Can people still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry, I thought you were saying that I'm frozen. So what does that mean? God is going to reward us as if we had achieved what we wished, what we wanted to do. This is an amazing idea in Judaism, which is that if we put in the effort and we are trying to do the right thing, then even if it doesn't end up happening for whatever reason, Hashem still rewards us as if we had done it. We have to think about what that means, because the rest of the world does not work like this. We've got students all across the community and all across the country and you know, all across the world who are off school and who will not get GCSE results this year, will not get A-level results this year, or at least if they do, it won't be because of the exams that they've taken, it will be from other criteria. Usually the way the schooling system works is you work for a period of time, you take an exam, and then the result of that exam determines how successful you were. Okay, so you could spend hours and hours applying yourself and working, get all of the questions wrong, and have nothing to show for it at the end of that time. Judaism doesn't work like that. If you spend hours and hours and hours working on something, on a project, on an act of chesed, whatever it is, and when push comes to shove, it doesn't end up being delivered for whatever reason, circumstances are taken out of your hands, in God's eyes, it's as if you've done it. The reward that you get for just the effort that you put in is just as significant and just as accepted as if you'd actually got the job done, which is an immensely powerful idea. And if only the world could kind of act and operate in that way, what a different world it would be. The fact that just for people putting the effort in and trying carries with it some sense of satisfaction and some sense of appreciation, some sense of result. But the world doesn't always operate in that way. So I think that's an amazing point to share as well. We've hit 1 o'clock. Nothing turns to a pumpkin at this point, but if people don't have questions, then I'm going to stop the recording. We can carry on talking, but if people do have questions, now is the chance to chime in.
I have a question.
Basically, to summarize what we've learned today, is basically have a good balance between learning Torah and your life and your, you know, whatever worldly occupation means, and your life, the way you conduct and everything else. Am I right to say so?
That's certainly one part of it. Let's try and condense and concisely reflect the things that we've learned. So as Rita said, the need for a balance between our approach to the world and our approach to Torah as well, right? We were mentioning before, Derech Eretz Kadma la Torah, right? There's certain things that are just a basic necessity that everybody should be having, in which case we didn't really talk about this and reflect on this, but if we're saying that Derech Eretz is, you know, courtesy, manners, respect, that's the baseline minimum, right? And people could say, well, I've got that, I'm fine. Then we have to also reflect on what it is that Torah study adds to the equation. So that is one thing to reflect on. Another thing to reflect on is how important it is to do things for the community. And Baruch Hashem, thank God, our community's really galvanized and come together to make sure that that everybody is in a good place. But there's a recommendation to do these things for the right reasons, to do these things altruistically as much as possible. There has to be incentive as well, but to do these as much as possible, to understand that even when things do not go our way, even when we put something into place and it doesn't happen, or it doesn't work the way we wanted it to, or it doesn't reach the people that we wanted it to, nonetheless, not only is it an amazing thing to have done, but number two, in God's eyes, the effort that we put in, the fact that we're trying, carries with it immense reward and immense acceptance in God's eyes, even if we don't even get to the point that we wanted it to get to. So there we go. That's
Rabbi,
have a good day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So I think what they're doing is delaying it until the end of the month, and then the new quote